What have I learned after my 1 year? I don't know what I'm going to say.
You haven't learned anything?
That it's nice to have a wife. Well, hold on.
Oh, how we resolve conflicts and annoyances.
Poorly.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. I am here with my husband Ryan again, and we are going to share our perspective on what we've learned in this last year of marriage. We celebrated our 1 year about a week and a half ago, and so I always love having him on and having him share his perspective. So hopefully you enjoy this video and you gain some insight and encouragement. And with that being said, let's dive in. So like I said, we recently celebrated our 1 year, and there's been so many things that we've learned, specifically about conflict and just learning how to live with each other and how to honestly be selfless.
When I was single, I could just do what I wanted and whatever time I wanted to do it. And it was all about me. And once you get married, it's no longer just my time. It's really about learning how to give up that selfishness and put, in my case, my wife before myself. And that can be challenging, but also very rewarding. We've talked about this before, but it really just highlights how selfish you are. So in that way, it's super challenging. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, until you realize how selfish you are, you can't be fixed, I guess. So right. I think it's just in the day-to-day things, from getting you coffee, doing things that you want to do. Yeah, it's challenging at times to not get my way. But at the same time, it's, I think, a huge blessing that I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally agree. I think even just with remodeling this house has been something that we've had to work together on in regards to just like things that have gone wrong, like our laundry room, which I've talked about in the previous video when we were setting that up, and then the guest bedroom flooded and the laundry room flooded right before it was going to be done, and we had to kind of take a step back and think about what really matters, because sometimes we can get so hung up on little things or projects that we're dealing with or focused on, and we always have to constantly remind ourselves that life is not about us and it's about God and serving Him first and foremost. And even though it's easy to say and it's harder to do, but it's something that God reminds us in those everyday moments or those everyday challenges. Now let's talk about conflict and how we've resolved things and how we've resolved arguments and how we go through that. I know for me, communication is something that I've learned, which is cliche, everyone says that, but once you're actually married and you're practicing how to do it, you realize, oh wow, there is such a benefit in communicating with your partner about like what's going on, even if it's something little, not brushing things under the rug. So what would you say about like conflict and how we've kind of resolved it together?
Poorly. Just kidding. I think we've done it. I think, like you said, like communication is key. But I think it kind of goes back to the fact that we need to put ourselves in each other's shoes and try and see the other person's perspective, even if we disagree with it. At least we can kind of put ourselves in each other's mindsets and realize that's a legitimate stance, even if I disagree with it. And then from there, we can kind of talk through what the conflict is. And at that point, we can kind of discuss like where we agree, where we disagree. But at the end of the day, you're gonna have to compromise. You're not gonna get both of your ways. It's just that's the way it is. It's a conflict, which means you both don't agree at the start. So unless you can,
easier said than done.
It's way easier said than done. Yeah, it goes back to what Jesus said, like treat others how you would want to be treated, and see others how God sees them. And if you can do those things, I think you're gonna be able to resolve conflict. You're still gonna have conflict, but you'll be able to resolve it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna throw out this example. Our refrigerator got dented, and I'm not going to go into details as to what happened, but it got dented. And for me personally, when I buy something new, I like to take care of my things. And we have a new refrigerator. when I saw the dent, I was really frustrated. And Ryan was like, well, it's just a little dent, you know? And it was in that,
It wasn't like
you could see it, it's still there. But it was something we had to really talk about because it is in those things that you can easily have arguments. And I mean, to this day, I see that dent, and Ryan says that he's eventually going to fix it.
Eventually is the best word. Learn it.
But that's where it gets hard because you have to understand like where the other person is coming from, even in like those situations. And so, yeah, it's a learning process. And obviously we've only been married for a year, so it's just gonna be something we're gonna continue learning. I've also been thinking about just things that we didn't expect in marriage. I know for me, I can so easily have expectations as to how I want my marriage to look like, or going into marriage, things that I expected to happen. And I think as you just learn about each other, you have to expect the unexpected. I think that's the biggest thing because there's no manual or rule book for marriage, and you have to just really surrender it to God and not idolize marriage because marriage is not going to be your identity. I know when you go through singleness, you think about marriage, especially those who are really desiring marriage, and you think, oh man, this is something that I want, or I will feel more fulfilled once I get married. But then when you get married, you realize, wow, if my identity becomes my marriage, it will not be fulfilling. My identity should always be on God.
So I didn't honestly quite know if I was ever going to get married. I would have said that I wanted to, and I did want to, but I never put much thought or effort into it, I guess. So I kind of came into marriage with more of just like an open book, just like I don't know what to expect, kind of. And we went through marriage counseling, which was good.
That was very helpful too.
But they kept talking about like the rose-colored lenses and all that. I didn't really have that because I guess I didn't expect I didn't know what to expect. You know, it's not that I didn't expect a lot. Obviously, you can't help but expect things, but I didn't know what to expect, I guess.
Yeah, because even I was thinking about just the way we both read the Bible or we do our quiet time. When you're single, it could be easier to take a step back and just like be present with God. But then when you're married, you're having to learn how to do that together, especially when you're living together, when you see each other a lot more often than when you were dating. How to be intentional about like reading the word and spending quiet time with God and all of these things. It changes, and it can be easy to put it in the back burner and say like, oh, I'll do it later. But we've been trying to find a rhythm and a schedule on how to do that and not make it such a thing where we're like checking off boxes, but we're learning how to learn about the Bible and grow in God's word together. What we've also recently been doing is going through 1 Corinthians 13. And we did this like a few weeks before Valentine's Day. So it wasn't something that we were doing for Valentine's, but we just wanted to look at these verses that so famously portray what love is. Love is patient, love is kind, love does not envy. And Ryan...
That's as far as we've got so far.
Yeah.
We're still in the middle of it.
Well, what's cool is that I didn't really think about doing this, but you thought about really meditating on each word and what each word means. So love is patient. What does it mean to be patient? What are ways that we are not being patient, and how can we learn to be patient in love? And not even patient just in marriage, but just in life as well, or even being kind.
Yeah, and I think so we focus on each word, but you come up with what does the word mean in your own words, and in your marriage, what does that look like, and and how does it look in relationship with those around you? And then we end up looking at the definition in a dictionary too.
Yeah,
and it's kind of interesting to see where the parallels are from what we thought it meant to what it means in the dictionary. It's been good to kind of focus word by word to know, or to think about, what does love is patient actually look like in life, instead of just blowing through the verse and saying love is patient, love is kind, love does not envy or boast or proud or rude. Instead of just blowing through it, it's taking time to just focus on that one word. Because love is all those things, but it's also that one word. And I feel like focusing on it really helps you see your deficiencies in that
your
one.
Weaknesses.
Yeah, your weaknesses. Because all of us are strong in some of the attributes and weak in the others. And I'm sure we all have weaknesses in all of them too. You start to really realize, oh, I'm not sure if I love very well.
Right. I mean, yeah, love is kind. It's like, okay, I can be kind with my husband, but am I kind to other people? You know, you kind of have to think of it too in a bigger picture, just so you can really see where your heart is at.
Yeah,
or maybe the other way around. Maybe I'm kind with other people, but not kind with my husband.
Yeah, so even like with me and you, or you and me, like I can see where I'm kind and I can see where I'm not kind. You know, even if it's in my thoughts. You know, it's like, oh no. And yeah, so I think it's relevant to every relationship you have in life, but I think it manifests itself more often, and probably I guess it's more of an emphasis in marriage. It's
Just dropped your ring.
I play with my ring.
Yeah, those words can really show themselves to be true in marriage, whether you're good at them or not good at them, because you can definitely notice each other's weaknesses. Like even envy, love does not envy. I struggle with comparison or where other people are at, and then I think, oh, what am I doing with my life? Like just constantly, and that's something that can eat at me at times, but I wouldn't say, oh, I'm envious. But when you really read the definition of like what envy means, you're like, oh, envy means like, oh, I want to be like, or I want to do what that person does, or I want to have, and you're like, oh shoot, you know, envy is an ugly word. I don't want that in my heart. And so it's kind of good to just like talk through these things, because then you're able to not brush anything under the rug, which I think is really important.
Yeah, and it's important to focus on yourself and not your partner. When you're
not like you do
it's
this.
It's not an accusation. It's about your heart, not theirs. You know.
Yeah, I've also recently been doing a devotional with a women's Bible study that I got involved in, and there were some questions in there that really stood out to me. And the author said, think about the words success and happiness. When you think about our world, how do you think our world views success and happiness versus how should we as Christians, as believers and followers of Jesus, view success and happiness? And so when I thought about that, success in the world's eyes looks like gaining more power or popularity or status. Happiness is fulfilling one's needs, making sure that one is satisfied, that we are happy based off of the circumstances that we want to happen. So it's a lot of self-centeredness in there versus how Christians view success and happiness. It's just all through God and from God and for God's glory, and it has nothing to do with us, which I think that's also important in marriage.
Yeah, what success looks like in the world. I think it starts with the fact that we make ourselves our own little gods. And therefore our happiness is all self-love based. You know, it's all selfish, like you were saying, and it shows itself in power. We seek power because that's, if we have the power, we can do whatever we want because we want to be our own little gods, and we can do any selfish thing we want. You can go through all the idols we make ourselves.
Money is a big one.
Money, if we have more money, we can spend more money on ourselves, and if we spend more money on ourselves, we get what we want. It all ends up being just this self-love, self-promotion, this I mean, that's what the world is all about. That's what Satan wants, is us to just love ourselves and pretend that we're little gods. And I mean, you see that in Genesis, and that's what Adam and Eve do when they grab for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They want to make themselves God. It's all about what does God say success is, not what we say success is.
Right, which I think is huge. I even have to remind myself of that, you know, when I'm working on something or doing something. I can totally see success different in my own eyes than what God sees. And so I just always have to do these mental checks on myself too. But yeah, it's
so
a really good point.
Yeah, I think it's just so countercultural to see success through God's lens, because you could be the poorest person on planet Earth and still be successful in God's eyes. You know, you could have nothing and you'd still have enough if you had your relationship with God and were loving people around you.
Yeah.
Because ultimately that's what God says success is. It's loving God with all your being and loving others. So if you're doing that, you're being successful. So who cares what you have? You have enough.
Which is something that we remind ourselves every day too, because it's so easy to get sidetracked and get very distracted with noise and with what we have and with how we look and all of these things. So, all right, and before we close, I just wanted to give advice to those who may be single, may feel like they're in a waiting period right now. I know this video is about our marriage, but like we said, life is not about marriage. And if you have a desire for marriage and you're single right now, there could be so many insecurities that you're going through. And I know someone may say, oh, well, it's easy for you to talk about singleness when you're married. But I was single for many years. Ryan was single for many years. And so I think there's such unique opportunities to grow in God during those single years and during that period where I really don't like to call it the waiting period, because then it feels like you're missing something, and you're not missing anything because your fulfillment comes from God and not you being in a relationship.
I think you can be content in any life season that you're in. I think that's the important thing to focus on, is that God is your purpose. That relationship with God is why you were created. So whether you're single or married, it doesn't change the fact that you can be content right where you are. Like I said earlier, I was single for a long time, and I didn't really know if I was going to end up getting married or not. And so I would have said that I wanted to, and I think the desire to be married is great. But also to be okay with the fact that you might not be is also good. Because ultimately, God knows what's going to happen, and God does everything for His purposes, and it's always good. And so to trust God, I think that He knows what's best, and He knows what's best for you, and He has His purposes in mind, and to trust that He's ultimately good and loving, and that whether I get married or whether I don't get married, it's okay, because marriage, like you said, isn't our identity anyway, and singleness isn't our identity anyway, and each has their positives and negatives.
It's true.
Don't ultimately
base everything
desire
off of
that to where it becomes an idol, and to where you can't be content with where you're at, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think a big thing that you touched on is just really surrendering and praying to God. If you want me to be single, then let it be. And it's just so hard to pray that prayer. I had to pray that prayer, and I was honest with God, because nobody, when you're single, wants to pray that prayer, but God sees your heart, and you're literally just giving that to God. And then when you do, God just puts all of the pieces together without you having to worry about it, without you having to intervene. And God's plans are so much greater than anything we can come up with for ourselves. And I always say that because it's so true, and God constantly reminds me of that. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you gained some insight and encouragement through our journey in marriage and in life and what God's teaching us. If you have any questions, comments, video recommendations, leave them down below. And don't forget to subscribe for more faith-based content. And with that being said, I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you all very soon for another video.